I'm Shane Bybee. I taught for over 20 years and spent the last 10 years guiding high school students on their journey to college. One thing I've discovered is that everyone's college experience is different. That's what this podcast is about. What are the things you didn't learn in high school that can help you transition and succeed in college? In today's episode, I talk with Ciara Smith. Ciara graduated from the University of Oklahoma in May of 2020 with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Theater specializing in costume design. When we spoke, she was getting ready to move to New York City and pursue her career in live theater. I hope you'll enjoy the episode. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me comments about things you'd like to know about in future episodes. Hello, thank you for joining me on Let's Talk College, a podcast about getting into and through college. Today, I'm talking with Ciara Smith, a student I taught. Oh my gosh, Ciara, how long ago was it? When did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 2016, so I would have had you as a
20,
teacher in 2014, maybe?
Yeah, 2014. So it's been 6 years or so. All right, well, let's talk about like a little bit of give some background, like where you went to college, what you ended up doing, and let's talk about that, and then let's see where the conversation goes.
Okay, well, yeah. So, hi. I graduated from Carroll in 2016, and I went straight to the University of Oklahoma. I was studying theater, specifically costume design for the theater. And I went all 4 years, and I graduated in May, just now, with that degree in costume design. And yeah, now unfortunately, the lockdown has changed plans a little bit because theater is, frozen. But exploring a bunch of different options at the moment for where to take my, creative, where to find a creative outlet that works for me at the moment.
You're in Atlanta.
I am in Atlanta right now. Yeah.
So the path from Oklahoma to Norman to Atlanta, how did that happen?
Well, while I was in Oklahoma, my family moved to Georgia. And when the lockdown hit, I moved out here to be with them. And in February, at some point, I'm going to be moving to New York to be with closer to the action where I want to be. And hopefully, things will start picking up from there.
Where is it you're trying to get to? I mean, you said costume design. So what are you trying to get to?
Well, I would really like to work I would like to work in theater, in costume design, but I'm also really interested in film, and wardrobe design for the film world and all of that sort of thing. And they're similar enough that the skill sets overlap, but they're not. It's going to be a bit of work for me to get into the industry, which is part of the reason why I want to go to New York. It's one of those cities where the two fields are closer than they are in most places.
What is the entry level like? What are you going to have to do first?
It kind of depends on how quickly I make friends. I've got technical skills as well as artistic skills. In theater, there's with the design side of things, there's a pretty sharp distinction between whether for example, whether you're the person who sews the costumes or you're the person who draws the costumes, or whether you're the person who builds the set or designs the set. And I've got both skill sets. So an easier entry level path for me would be to start out as a technician in theater, either, working in a shop as a stitcher and then getting to know people that way, and then saying, hey, I also design. Or I could work like in the theater, literally running around backstage and like dressing people and get to know folks that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the step to getting a job? I mean, a job like that, it's not going to be like a posting on Craigslist, or like, how do you find out about stuff like that?
There are certain like dedicated job sites, like, there's one called Production Hub, and there's another called Staff Me Up, that are kind of tailored for the artistic, like entertainment industries. They tend to be like paid services though. So I can't really afford that at the moment. So I'm relying on like who I know. There's a really like a lot of people from the University of Oklahoma graduate with a theater degree, and then go to New York. It's a weird pipeline, but it's pretty big. So right now I'm putting out feelers among all the people I know in New York, like, hey, how did you get your job? Like, do you know anyone who needs an assistant or a stitcher? It's a really, really a word of mouth industry.
So that's the job title is stitcher. Like you're gonna be sewing the costumes. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Seamstress is what we used to be called, but
Okay. We can't, it's too woke. That's not woke enough, right? You have to be a stitcher now.
precisely. Yeah.
That's cool. So it isn't, you said, I remember when you told me you were going to OU, and I was like, well, how did you get into costume design? Let's talk about that first. How did you find out that was a passion?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I can't quite remember. I'm not sure I remember correctly how it like popped into my head at first. My mother insists that I wanted to be a costume designer from the time I was like 4. I remember learning about the field for the first time when I was, I think, going into 8th grade, because I always liked clothes and fashion. And that was originally like when I was a kid, I was like, I want to go into fashion design. And, I've always loved clothes and fashion and beauty and things like that. When I was kind of around that, like, almost high school age, right when people, like, right when all the adults in my life started going, but what do you want to do? Right. Um, I started talking to like my teachers, and I think it was an art teacher in middle school, maybe, who had been involved in the fashion industry in some way. And she kind of took one look at me and was like, you're not going to enjoy the fashion industry.
I'm thinking of my memories of you and my knowledge of my knowledge of the fashion industry very limited, but I could see where that would possibly be a collision.
She was right, I think. I definitely, yeah, there's a lot of problems in that industry. There's problems in every industry, but my sensibilities don't really line up with the fashion industry very much. But she's the one, as I recall, that art teacher who told me.
You want to give a shout out?
What?
You want to give her a shout out?
Oh
no, did I put you on the spot?
I think it was Monica LaPierre.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, that was high school. Yeah,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I think I wasn't in high school yet. I think she was giving a talk or something, and I think
Okay.
it was her. Yeah, I liked her. She was very cool. But she's the one who said, like, hey, costume design is a thing. And I thought, well, like, the reason I like fashion is because I watched, like, the Golden Age MGM movies with all the, like, gorgeous dresses. And I was like, thinking about it, the fashion industry is more about trends than it is about, like, doing new things every day. So costume design seems like more of a good fit for me.
Did any of it come from the synchronized swimming?
Oh gosh, some of it, yeah. I
The
really like
for that
too. Or rather, I think I was drawn to costume design and synchronized swimming for the same reason rather than the other way around. I've always liked like graceful things. I always get bored, like, I can't lift weights, I get bored. I have to be doing like exercise that's also pretty, or like, dance or what have you. I've always preferred that. I've always preferred, I don't know. I like things that are pretty and make people feel pretty. And so, yeah, for that reason, I think synchronized swimming spoke to me the same way that costume design did.
So I will tell you, in my history of working with students, the thousands or so, I've worked with 2 synchronized swimmers. You're related to the other one, right? So how did you get into that? How did you and Cleena end up doing that in high school? Not a path we hear of very often.
No. Well, I was probably in middle school. I think I was in middle school when I started synchronized swimming, and there was only one team in the region at that point. And honestly, we were both swimmers already, like speed swimmers. And we were starting to get like too good to just be on the recreational teams anymore, but we didn't really want to compete in that. I mean, I found it boring, but I liked being
Going
able,
up and down and up and down.
yeah, you get bored. Like, what do you think about when you're doing that? So just, I don't even know how we found it, but we found the team. It was like a half an hour away or something from where we lived. So we thought, sure, let's give it a try. And we loved it. And there actually, while I was in high school, several members of that team, including me and my sister, formed the second team in the region, which is still going on right now.
Oh, wow. So, okay. And so what I got to ask, so Kalina followed you up to OU. That's not that she's going to hate me saying it that way, I think, but she went to OU after you did, to say it more accurately. Is she still at OU?
Yeah, she's going to graduate in May.
Okay. And costume design as well. She did something in theater.
She did scenic design.
Scenic design. Okay. Very cool. And is she going to be joining you in New York in the summer or in the fall?
Yeah, she is. Funnily enough, she's the one who really always wanted to go to New York. And I kind of avoided it because the idea kind of intimidated me because everyone goes to New York for theater. Yeah, I ended up kind of considering it almost like, not by accident, but I just like kind of I've been living in Atlanta. I've been kind of trying to figure out what my next steps are. And at about the same time that I was really like needing a kick in the pants, one of my old friends said she needed a roommate. And I thought, this is it. This is the opportunity. I have to make this work. So, yeah.
What was the actual degree? When I look at your actual piece of paper, what does it say on there?
Oh, I think what it says is BFA in drama and emphasis costume design.
Okay. Yeah. BFA in drama, emphasis costume design. All right. What was now, and like you said, that Norman isn't, I remember when we talked about it, you're like, Norman has a really great, or OU has a really great program for this. Wasn't like people, my niece is applying, is trying to get into musical theater. And so we knew about Texas State and Michigan and those places. Norman wasn't a place that really, and my limited knowledge on it, that I thought that's, how did you find out about Norman being a program for, or OU being a program for costume design?
Yeah, well, I found that the business school and the football team at OU kind of takes up all the PR.
They suck up all the oxygen in the room.
Yeah. But in the Carroll Theater department, we had sent several people up there for theater in the past. OU is it's one of a few schools in the region that is just really good, not just for like theater in general, but actually has a dedicated design program. And while I attended OU, we actually like regionally distinguished ourselves quite a lot. So
in what way? In what way?
Oh, there's, conferences and competitions, and my senior year, I got sent out, thrown to the wolves. I got sent out by myself to Louisville to attend a new conference. And essentially, if I could cut it, then the school would start attending. So I think they're going again. SETC. It's a regional theater conference that's well known.
So Southeast Theater Conference, I'm guessing, at SETC.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. What did you do? I mean, what did you do at a conference like that? You said you got thrown to the wolves for it.
There's that one. There's a lot of speakers and a lot of events you can go to, and like lectures you can attend. And then there's also a competitive section where, for designers, for me, I was presenting as a craft artisan, which is a skill I picked up. It's like a subset of costume technician, where craft artisans make the really weird stuff. And I was presenting, I had invented a new really quick, like slap on and take off removable tattoo, which is helpful because these days a lot of theater shows kind of pretend they're movies and you need like very impossible things to happen. And so we did a show like that, and I invented this thing to make it possible. And so I presented it, and I actually won. I won at the conference in that little like craft artisan section. Uh, it's competition in
Oh, that's
theater.
cool.
I It was a lot of fun. I
Yeah.
really think my favorite part of theater, or really any creative pursuit, is trying new things and learning and figuring stuff out. The puzzles are the fun parts for me.
Mhm. So by the time, I mean, the great thing about a program like that, though, is when you finish up, you've got this wonderful portfolio. That's
Oh
one
yeah.
of the things we talked about with a couple of people was like when you graduate, like it's regardless of what school you go to, do you have like what were you able to do when you got there? That's the big thing. Right? My thing that I challenge people to do, I say it all the time, is find a place where my first challenge is find a place where you can be in the top third of students that go there. But really, when you start looking at it, like where is a place that you're going to be able to go that's going to give you the experiences you need to prove what you can do, right? I mean, we talked with Devlin at Improving a couple of weeks ago, and his comment was when they look for someone to hire, they want to see here's some things you coded. He owns a software company, so here are. It's not just about like I graduated from this school in software with a or whatever. It's you really do because that's a where you can demonstrate it immediately. Like Ciara can go in and say, "Here's my portfolio of what I've designed. Here is this temporary or slap on tattoo." Which I
Mhm.
think the great thing for that is one, you can get it put on very quickly and easily, but also it can be the same every time it needs to be the same, which is important for the
Yeah.
repetition and the building of the moment in the theater. What was it? I mean, you want to get into the technical part of like what that was? What was it a tattoo of?
Okay, so I had to make a couple there were a bunch of them for a show. The designer just wanted everyone to have tattoos, and then
What show was it?
uh, Cabaret.
Okay.
Yeah, he wanted all the chorus to have tattoos, but of course then they also play different characters and they couldn't have tattoos for that. Um, yeah, the technical part, there are these medical devices that are scar healing strips, and they're made of medical grade silicone, and they're self adhesive, and they're reusable, and they're safe. They're like hypoallergenic, and they're made to be worn for like a long time. And they're also made to be really subtle, because if you've got a scar somewhere, and you're trying to cover it up or you're trying to like fade it, obviously you don't want to draw attention to it while you're doing that. And so I had to mess around with it, but essentially I painted on those things and then got them to match the skin tones of whoever they were on. And you can just slap them on clean skin and they stick. But
Hmm.
when you take them off, they're strong enough that you don't have to replace them very often at all.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's
Okay.
really cool. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy difficult to paint on silicone. Silicone is kind of famous for not taking paint at like nothing sticks to silicone except still silicone. So I had to like make my own paint using silicone and different kinds of pigments. It was a lot of fun and really hard, but really, really cool
What
to see
an
on stage.
what an awesome problem. I mean, it is an awesome problem to have to solve. That is
Mhm.
so cool. Is that one of the things? I mean, you said that was your senior year, so I mean, that I guess I don't know what my question was there. There really wasn't a question there. Um, so all right. What other questions? Okay, so you're going to go to New York. What have you been doing? What have you been doing since graduation? It's been on all the pandemic stuff. You graduated at a really great time in our
Oh yeah.
country's history
Yeah.
to get a job, especially in what you're wanting to do. So what have you been doing since May?
Um, well, I've been throughout college, I've had this kind of like not side gig, but like casual interest in graphic design and digital art. And I've always been like an artist, like outside of theater. I've always been like a pen on paper artist as well. So I, while I was in school, I never stopped any of that. And throughout, while I was in college, I did some graphic design work. Like I made a logo for a school club, and I did some like freelance work for like companies that people I knew worked for and things like that. So I have this kind of like weird side portfolio of graphic design work, and theater is, by definition not going on right now with the social distancing and all that. So I've been doing a lot of like freelance graphic design work, and some like commissioned artwork. And actually what I'm looking for in New York is, in addition to like backstage or costume shop and studio jobs, because those are in short supply right now, I'm also applying to a lot of graphic design work as well. Because it was one of those things that I didn't realize I had a portfolio in until I sat down and looked at all of my like
Yeah.
individual projects, and I thought, oh, okay, I could make something out of this.
Are you doing like a website or anything? Like, where are you showcasing your stuff?
Yeah, I've got a website. I'm so lucky that I've got a weird name, because I just got my name as the URL.
Okay. So is it Ciara Smith?
It's Ciara Neve Smith.
Okay. Spell the middle name.
Niamh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Niamh. Okay. So Ciara Nim Smith and .org.com.
.com.
.com. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm just gonna check that out.
Yeah.
And
That's
you're
my portfolio website. I've also like got an Etsy shop where I do like, put things up, and if people want them, they can buy them or
all
not.
right.
Like
That's,
what have
that's
you.
what, I was talking about that because one of these Zahn talked about in the first interview was just musicians, and his goal is, his financial part of it is he wants to help musicians with their finances and do that kind of stuff. But I was curious about just the modern take. I mean, we talked when we got started about, if you want to be an investment banker, then there's 20 schools you need to go to get a degree and to be an investment banker. But really kind of beyond that particular career, yeah, if you want to be a Supreme Court justice, there's a limited number of schools you probably need to go to law school to in order to make the connections and have that kind of stuff. I get that 100%. But beyond that, there's so many ways you can take charge of your own distribution of your material, that you can just push stuff out and curate it on your own now. And that's what I was talking with Jamie. I think Jamie we're going to talk about getting her a website going where she can showcase her stuff as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, what I've found is that, it's an uphill battle. No one's ever just going to stumble across your website and like, be like, oh, wow, how weird. I need a graphic designer, and here is one. Like, but it's really just nice to be able to slap it on your resume or your cover letter and go, check me out. Here I am,
Well, and you talked about relationships. Again, from the casual outside viewer, right? We see all these situations. If you start tracing IMDb and connections between artists and the people they get connected with, a particular director kind of uses the same set designer or the same costume designer, or I guess IMDb is not the best place because you're talking about live theater, but similar stuff. You talked about film earlier, and they're going to have that person. So it's about making those connections, but that first connection is the critical thing. And they're finding that place that they can connect with you. So we talked about, how you found out, how you figure out this is what you wanted to do when you were in high school. I mean, what are things that you look back at high school? I never saw a stressed Ciara Smith.
You never saw me in college.
I saw, I saw a lot of, always very poised. I saw a tired Ciara Smith a lot of times because synchronized swimming workouts were so early in the morning and whatnot. But I never saw a frantic or a frazzled. What are things, I ask everybody this, what are things people told you needed to worry about in high school that you look back and you're like, yeah, that didn't turn out to be that big a deal?
Well, I think in high school, I was always aware that like a lot of the one size fits all, like college advice kind of didn't apply to me because I wanted to go into such a weird little niche of an industry. Like there were a lot of things like I was never, it, I was never like that stressed about, oh, I can't even, I don't know. There was a lot of stuff that kind of like I heard and just kind of like let just fall out of my brain because I kind of knew it didn't work for me. For me, looking back, what I remember is kind of being surprised at things that I wish I had known, but didn't because I wanted such a niche. Like my priorities just, your priorities have to be very different when you want to go into like for every field. There's different things you need to look at. And I was not really aware of all of the priorities that I needed to go into entertainment and then also designing for entertainment. Because something that I kind of realized only when I was like about to graduate college, like the last year or so, is I underestimated how very important networking is to the industry of like theater in general. Like, because it's like you said, you look at the IMDb like spider web, and the same like you'll find people who just work with each other over and over again because like they just clicked, and or you can track someone's climb just from, oh, here they were as a stagehand, oh, here they are as an assistant, here they are as an associate, and it's all to the same person. And it really, really, I suppose what I wish I had thought of more is that I wanted to stay in the Midwest for school, but I wanted to go to the East Coast to work. And so my network now is very much in the Midwest.
Okay.
And I needed to put a lot more time into developing one on the East Coast, and I kind of didn't. So now I'm trying to do that in a rush. Yeah, the interpersonal things, I think I did not realize how important they would be.
So, I mean, kind of what I'm hearing there. So if you like, this is weird for you. Cause like we talk to students, high school students, a couple of points about it. They're going to go pre-med, pre-law, which is kind of ridiculous, but they want to be doctors and lawyers, and they want to be things that there are TV shows about, right? That they know.
Right.
I don't know that anyone ever says, or they want to be teachers and nurses too. There's that aspect. Yeah. I mean, again, I still talk about synchronized swimming. I have 2 students in my history of working with students who went on to do set design or costume design in college. Right. But because you knew that, I wonder if that just took a lot of the stress off, because I kind of see 3 niches of students, or 3 groupings of students. Really. There's the top group that's like, they got to get top 6%. They got to get top 10% so they can make sure they get into that college of their dreams. And that's the only way they're ever going to be successful, which they find out later on that really isn't the only way they're ever going to be successful. But if you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, it really comes down to your LSAT or MCAT score and your GPA. And those are the 2 factors that are going to come down. Network's not really going to matter. There's going to be a personal statement you write, but beyond that, really, network's not going to be as big a deal as, what's the cutoff that a particular school would accept for LSAT or MCAT and for your GPA. But for you, I mean, it is knowing, I talk about this a lot with people, like you got to know what's going to happen after college. Because college isn't the destination. College is a milestone on the path to the destination. Mm-hmm. And then asking a 16-year-old to figure out what that destination is a little bit crazy. Like, how do you even do that? But when I talk about the 3 groups, and you have that group that's like, I got to make, what can I do for an extra credit assignment? What the extra credit assignment, I have to kick a puppy? Okay, well, I'll go kick a puppy right now. Like if that's what was required, they would do it if it meant 1 extra 100th of a point so they could beat the other person for their GPA. There's also the other end of that group, which is the group that is really worried about what's the very minimum I have to do because I really want to go smoke some pot, or I want to go do something else. What's the least I absolutely have to do to get through? The middle group is the group that I really love working with. That group that isn't just chasing every little point and trying to find every edge. They're just hardworking kids. And we used to joke around about in your class. One of those, I was thinking this morning about some of the things I did as a teacher that I think I had good relationships with my students. I wasn't probably always the best, most professional teacher out there, but I would talk about you and Molly having a celebrity death match because we'd be in our Socratic seminars. and, and it was so clear that like it was you and Molly at some point were going to be on opposite side, whatever the topic was. And I kind of got to think it might have been Molly was going to stake out the opposite of whatever Ciara said. Definitely that's my perception of it right now. So I got to get in touch with her and get her on here because she's definitely that driven. How do I get this? I mean, that's been her pathway through, you know? So you have that group of kids. That middle group is the group that's the most fun to work with. The kids that make, 93 to 100 GPAs and they get their work done, but they're really concerned about pursuing those passions. Great kid I worked with last year. It's going to be a walk-on volleyball player at Baylor. But, she finished up with a really great SAT score. But the thing that drove her the whole time was just her own competitive edge because she's such a competitive athlete as it is. It wasn't like that was made her fun. She got really mad. It was hard to tell sometimes was she mad at me because she missed, but you get that sense of just that she gets really angry whenever she misses something and whatnot. So there's, I guess, what I'm trying to different motivations for different kids, but finding that middle group that's just wanting to be great. They're not wanting to be great because it's going to give them an edge on something. And we always try to find prize in class to do that, right? Demonstrate you're great at what you really had.
Sorry, you cut out there for just a sec. Could you repeat that?
The last thing I said was I always try to design like assignments for you guys where what was the multi-genre project at the end of the year where you could decide how you wanted to demonstrate. I think you had Noose, I think your freshman year.
Yeah.
And we had that assignment of what's your story assignment, or no, it was, oh my gosh, Make It Memorable, the Make It Memorable project that had two assignments. It was, show me something, demonstrate what you learned this year and make it memorable. And I've had students that took that assignment and I referenced that assignment for them in letters of recommendation for them. I remember one student, Ethan, brought in he showed us how to detect photons in the atmosphere. It was such a cool project. Yeah, it was the coolest job in the world. That teaching GT kids was so fun if you would let them just find ways to help let them explore where they were. Teaching any kid really, that's the GT kids there. That's true for any kid. If you could ever, that's the way that education system's so screwed up. Your mom and I would think talked about this a little bit. Like we get these neat boxes that we're like, you have to do, here's the recipe for success. You mix these things up and bake it and you're going to have success. And that's just misguided.
I think that's one of my mom was really helpful in keeping me like chill and kind of
I can totally see that.
Hopefully in that middle group because her career path has been all over the place. I mean, she has done everything under the sun. She went from being a caterer to being like a technical writer for NASA. She's done everything and
been incredibly successful at everything. That's amazing for your mom.
Yeah. And she's just like always been so like, you're kind of freaking out at the end of college because, you're faced with the industry that you're going to go into and, you've inevitably learned things about it that are not what you thought they were going to be. And you're like freaking out. And in my case, I was like, my expected salary is what? There's just these stressors that are like coming your way all of a sudden. And I was freaking out a little. And my mom was really instrumental in calming me the heck down because she was like, you don't have to do one thing for the rest of your life. You have a degree to do what you got a degree in for a while. And if you don't like it, do something else. And it's simple. And it's really very comforting to hear that. And I don't think students hear that enough, actually.
We've talked about, my sister and I have talked about that for my niece because, she wants to do musical theater and she lives in Oregon. So the musical theater programs aren't big in Oregon. So she's looking at places that are going to be out of state for a lot of them. And we were talking about, do you take on debt? My other niece, when she was graduating from high school, she got accepted to Emerson. And that was cool. And she wanted to be a writer. And I was like, that's cool, Michaela. Do me a favor. And at that time I had just started this business and I was doing freelance writing. And for some of the gigs I was making 7 cents a word. Right. And so I said, Michaela, that's a $70,000 a year education. You're going to take out loans to do a lot of it. So you're going to graduate college with $200,000 in debt that you're going to have to repay at 7 cents a word. How many words is that? And she ended up going to UMass Amherst, where she could go to a public university, in-state tuition, and be able to do that. And that I have zero idea if anything I said, like anything I ever say, what you guys come back with me sometimes will be like, remember that time that you did this? And I'm like, God, I don't remember that at all. Like I am 100% sure I absolutely did that because it sounds exactly like something I would do. But I also don't remember actually having done that. But it's the same thing. Like I can remember telling Michaela that, but she probably has no clue that I said anything like that. Anyway, back to that idea though, was like thinking of something. So what is the expected starting salary for a stitcher in a theater?
Well, stitchers are fortunately hourly, usually. And in New York, they've got a minimum wage that almost gets you at the standard of living, so that's okay.
All right.
But for a costume designer, it's like in New York, it's about 32,000 a year.
Wow.
Or like the median base pay, which is not. I mean,
well, what's your rent going to be on the apartment that you're moving into? Can I ask?
Hmm?
Or what would let's make it hypothetical, so we're not giving a curious, but like what is the rent on the apartment like you're going to be sharing?
Well, for apartments in the areas that are close to, art centers and, places where my work would take place, or within reasonable commutes, like apartments kind of go for like 3,000 a month around there. So it's really, yeah, it's it's an intimidating thing, especially coming from the Midwest. Um, that being said, I mean, the minimum wage and standard wages and things like that are also different.
Yeah.
But it is a very expensive place to live. And
Yeah.
so when I was and most places where young designers want to go, young entertainers want to go, you think they're all cities, right? They're all, Chicago or LA or New York or, sometimes Atlanta, and cities are just expensive. And it's thinking about that and then looking at like how the industry pays its workers, it is a really kind of demoralizing thing sometimes. And I'm still kind of working through my feelings about it, because I've got unusually for artists in general, I think I've never had like a crisis of self-esteem, like a really like I've just like always had a pretty good sense of like who I am and what I want and what I'm worth, not necessarily financially, but like I know when I know what I want. I know what respect looks like to me. And unfortunately, the industry's pay structure in theater is not particularly respectful to
So what
designers.
is it? I mean, because that's something people, I don't think people think about that. Like,
Okay, so I'm gonna be I want to tread carefully here because I want a job, but if but
sure. No, you need
wage-
to be objective. I mean, what is the pay structure? Are you paid by the show, by the contract? What is it?
yeah, pay structure usually. Most designers, especially young designers, are freelance and non-union. So in general, you get paid on each show is a contract.
Mhm.
And the the type of contract, usually you get paid in thirds. You get paid at the beginning, you get paid upon a certain like deadline, like when you get like when you turn in your designs to a shop and say build it. That's a pretty standard like midpoint for your second third, and then opening night is usually the last third.
Okay.
And you'll notice that it's not hourly.
Yeah.
Or a salary or anything like that, which is a lot of, I'm not speaking for all designers here, but my design method is very research based. I put in a lot of hours. It's not just sitting and drawing and thinking. It's like a lot of research, a lot of hours.
Finding the time period, what's right for that time period, or I mean, what do you do the research on?
There is a lot of variation in time periods, like in like length of design processes. That really depends on things like the scale of the theater, the scale of the show, the budget you've got, things like that. But let's see, in college, like you mentioned earlier, I went to a school where the program was pretty small and my portfolio turned out really good. So I've designed 8 shows. Four, I think would have been 5 if it weren't for the pandemic. 4 shows were through a shop like that I gave them drawings and they built it. So for those, I would usually, the design, like from me starting the work to opening night, would usually be about 8 months, 6 to 8 months, depending on what time of year. And I would spend, oh Christ, like it would vary a lot, but I would spend anywhere from 10 to 20 hours a week during that time working on the design. You think for 8 weeks, that's like a part-time job. For 8 months, that's like a lot of hours. And as the better you get at designing, the more comfortable you get with the process, the quicker things go. But when you think about, like, I think there are levels of theaters that have different pay structures. And I think for a reasonably big theater that pays on a standardized like scale, a costume designer could expect to get paid $2,000-$3,000 for that overall.
For 8 months of work at 20 hours a week, or 12 to 20 hours a week.
Like I said, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but yeah, like given the size of the theaters that I was designing for in college, they would be about in that pay range.
Wow.
If I were non-union, which it is difficult to get into the union.
That was going to be my next question. So how do you get into the union?
It's an application process that involves your portfolio and, reviews and things like that. But what it really comes down to is the dues, because if you're doing a lot of union work already, like at union theaters and things like that, but you're not a union member, and then you become a union member, your pay kind of it covers your dues and things like that. But if you're part of the union and you're still doing a lot of non-union work, you have to make up what they don't get. And if you're getting paid less because it's non-union, and you have to pay dues because it's because your work is non-union, it's a bigger loss than it is an asset. And so I've been told on average that as a designer, you wait 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then you see if you're, and then you only apply to the union once not being in the union is preventing you from getting jobs, which can take, depending on your region, sometimes that never happens. The Midwest is not very heavily unionized. So like there is no union in Oklahoma. So all of my professors, bar one who worked a lot in Houston, they were all non-union. And only he would do a lot of non-union work in Oklahoma, but he then would do union work in Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a complicated thing.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's, so you said, and that's, I think, another thing people don't have a vision of. You said 5 to 8 years, right, of doing work that of piecing together, because ones we've talked about you doing is helping me out, tutoring some kids with English work and essay help and things like that to supplement, right? So you're talking about 5 to 8 years before you have the credibility really to start even applying to the union once you have a portfolio now, but you can't do it right out of college. Like you're not going to have the things on your resume that are necessary, or the reviews that are necessary to have a union application accepted or approved, whatever the language would be. And I think people, again, because you come out of high school, like you were in a great theater program. You did theater at Carroll, right?
Yeah.
So it was a great theater program, like really well supported and well maintained and that kind of thing for a high school theater program. And so, and I don't say that condescendingly. I hope it didn't come across as condescending.
No, you're correct.
Yeah, it was really well done. And I mean, I remember the fall musical like crazy. I had a kid my first year there. I wish I remembered what the show was, but there was some kind of carousel, and he got his arm stuck and broke his arm in the theater because it was in the carousel. I just remember him coming in with a cast one day, and he did it in the musical. It was a musical injury. But so you come out of there, but again, I'll turn back to my niece. She's very talented, has a beautiful singing voice. Can really, do. But when you come out of, it's just like coming out of high school as a varsity football player or a varsity swimmer. You were one of the best at your high school, but when you go on to do it in college, if you go from the starting varsity football team your junior year, right? So you start your junior and senior year, but then you go to college. Everyone who's playing in the college was a varsity football player their junior and senior year, at least. And so everyone now, the next step, so you've gone to that step, right? Everyone who was at OU in the theater department, they were the best people coming out of their high school. Now you go to a situation where not only are you now going from everyone you're going to be seeing in New York has that aspect to it. You talked about having that confidence and that ability, but just that you're going to be spending 5 to 8 years in the trenches doing grunt work. It's an apprenticeship, isn't it? In a lot of ways.
And it's and in this way, I've made use of the pandemic to, take some time and kind of think very hard about this industry and like what I want to do with it, because like I was saying before, I've never struggled with that, like I for better or worse, I've never gotten into that starving artist mindset. That's never been something that I want for myself. I have no problem with selling out and being a commercial artist or whatever. I have no problem with a steady paycheck. So it's weird to take it's weird to think about like how much of how hard am I willing to work for how little I'm going to get? And I count myself, it makes things more complicated in some ways, but I count myself lucky in that I've got a lot of different creative outlets in my life. I can do graphic design. I can do normal art. I enjoy stitching as well as designing, which, like I said, that's a technical job. That's an hourly job. It's a little less artistic, and it's still not, I'm not going to get rich off it, but that can be a 9-to-5 job that I get steady payment for. And it's, there's sometimes it's tempting to go, well, then just don't do the design part, because you're not gonna, you're gonna have to work so hard before you see any payoff. But at the same time, it's just a very difficult like thing to think through. And I'm still thinking through it. I mean, clearly I'm still thinking through it, like as I'm talking, but it's a heavy thing to know that, like, this is the industry and I'm going in as clear-eyed as I can. How do I go in and do and get what I want out of it? And so that's actually part of the reason why at the moment a lot of what I'm looking at in New York is film, because that industry is a lot more heavily unionized, which I have now realized is something that I would prefer. I've got a lot of I don't enjoy industries that are predatory toward artists because we're a vulnerable population, because so many of us would do anything to create art. Um, and so I'm trying to carefully plan out where to go so that I don't get taken advantage of. It's definitely a minefield. Um, and so yeah, the pandemic has helped me think through that a lot. A lot more clearly. I've got a pretty good path in my mind right now, and I'm exploring a couple different options. But that is something that, like, well, like I was saying earlier, that is something I did not think about in high school or even early college. Like exactly how much work I'm gonna have to put in to just making sure I'm given like given the respect financially and artistically that I require.
So let me ask, and I don't get too personal in it. I mean, did one of the big barriers back up? One of the things I want to say, but this is the time to do it, right? You don't have a mortgage. You may or may not have a car payment. You're going to live in New York, so probably aren't going to have a car payment. Um, you don't have kids. You don't have any of those kind of responsibilities. I don't think you had kids. Any of those responsibilities that end up happening. You don't have them right now. So the only big thing that a lot of high college students are going to end up with is debt. Did you end up accruing a lot of debt in college?
No, I did not end up with a lot of debt, which is very, very fortunate.
Yep.
And it gives me a lot more flexibility as well.
Was that a factor in choosing OU? Because OU has some
Oh, yeah.
great out of state tuition breaks.
Mhm.
And then it's going to be a public university where you're going to have the opportunities. It's going to be lower cost anyway. Was that a
Yeah,
big
it
factor?
definitely was a choice. I mean, I chose OU for a couple reasons. One, I had several people from Carroll Theater go up there for theater before. So I had heard good reviews about it. And so it wasn't like a complete unknown. It was also, like you said, a public university. And even though they they didn't give me in-state tuition because so much of their population comes from Texas that they can't afford it. But I got scholastic scholarships and things like that. So I ended up in an okay situation. But I was applying to other places like Oklahoma. OU wasn't exact. It was somewhere between reach and safety. It was a school I kind of thought I would end up at. But I wanted to apply everywhere, you know?
Where else did you apply? Do you remember?
I remember I got rejected by Tulane and I was super offended, even though I didn't want to go. um, I
No,
got
I'm awesome. How can you reject me? Yeah.
I got rejected from NYU and I was like, okay, fair. Um, Weirdly, I got accepted to USC, even though it was that was weird. Like I think I got accepted by mistake or something because I never interviewed. I sent my portfolio, but I never interviewed. So I don't know what that was.
Well,
But
the interviews aren't always required. I mean, interviews are sometimes, especially for depending on what it is. I mean, if you were going to be on stage, there was going to be an audition piece to it. But I mean, the interview they may have been just like, yeah, we'd love to have you.
yeah.
The crazy thing about interviews. So this is the little secret about the admissions process. It depends on who the person's interviewing with, but for colleges, interviews are more about maintaining alumni. And I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I don't care. Because there's so much bullshit in the college admissions process. That's the thing about it. Like there's all this stuff that interviews, if you're doing alumni interviews, it's more about maintaining a relationship with the alumni than any of the feedback they're getting from the actual interview. The admissions office, yeah, if they came back and said this person's a total creep and they did this and they did that, that's definitely going to be a factor. But beyond that, it's really about the admissions office keeping alumni relations going well than any really real value that they get out of the interview itself. Kids have got to take it seriously because it's not something you can blow off. But that's part of the reason fewer and fewer schools are using the interview anymore. I wonder that it's not going to change, but admissions process we're about to see get really expensive because so many schools are opting to not use test scores now. University of California system is about to get really expensive or they're just going to shorthand it and pick up. I don't know if you've watched what happened in the last few months for college admissions, but it's about to get kind of crazy in the next couple of years.
Oh, wow.
Well, and you're going to see, this is another part of it, right? You're going to see schools not named USC who have a $70,000 a year price tag, but you're not getting a USC portfolio when you come out of it, right? You're not getting that actual LA experience that you can go in and say, this is what I have done while I'm in college. And so you've got some school in the Midwest that is selling itself like it's a $70,000 a year school, but they really can't afford that. They're already in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a lot of private universities merge and close just because they're not going to be able to maintain what they've been doing for the last 10 years. That's going to be another impact of the pandemic, which is good and bad. I mean, it needs to happen to some degree. All right. Closing in on an hour. I mean, is there any, like, so we talked about, you mentioned this earlier, and I think we may have touched on it, but I asked you about things that they said were important that didn't turn out to be. And you made the comment, you said networking was something that you wish someone had really said, look, you need to do this more. Is there anything else out there? Like, you wish that someone had said, look, focus on this or do this?
I don't know that I heard this advice, but I think it's good. It worked for me. If you're like, I'm like you said earlier, I was never like top, like extra credit, top of the list, like GPA wise, but I was in that, like, I was smart and I worked pretty hard and I got like 92s and 95s on things, and that was good enough for me. But something that I was luckily aware of before I went, into the college application process is that I figured I would do better in college as I didn't want to be the small fish in a big pond because I had a pretty calm approach to things like studying and GPA. And I thought better to go somewhere where the department's a little smaller, and I don't have, if I don't spend every moment of my life competing for my professor's attention, I will still not be overlooked because I'm just not good at like grifting. I'm not that student who will like always come up at the end of class and like ask a question just to get my face in front of the professor. I'm just not like, that's just not how I work, especially when I'm like tired and stressed and I'm studying all the time. And my default is to just kind of calm down and sit, in the middle to the back of the classroom. And because of that, I chose a school with a small program, actually accidentally small, because when I got to OU, I don't know exactly what had happened. I think there had been like a staff switch up a couple years prior that had made things tense for some students. But as a sophomore, there were no seniors and juniors anymore in the costume program. So it was me and my 4 other sophomore costume designers and a couple freshmen. And so I had an insanely small pool to work with, and it grew as I was, bumped along like year to year. But that ended up being good for me because I got a good portfolio, and I, learned about myself under stress because I had, like you said, I had not been really stressed in high school. I never stressed in high school. I never, I was never someone who crammed. I never pulled an all-nighter. I never did anything like that. So in college, I was lucky that I got to feel real stress for the first time in an environment where if I, closed off and like didn't talk for a couple days, I still would be, I wouldn't just be forgotten about. That was nice.
So I made the comment about you being poised and had that grace all through high school, but you made the comment that I didn't see you in college. So what happened was the stress of a show. What caused the stress in college?
That I did get stressed in college, not about classwork, but about the shows. And there were a couple reasons for that. Some of which are a little complicated. In general, though, I mean, I found myself fully responsible for something that I cared a very great deal about, that also affected a lot of other people. And that's a lot of responsibility, especially for,
20 years old or 19 years old too.
yeah. And I'm a pretty independent minded person. So every now, it's kind of weird to be in charge of like a communication network where everybody needs information yesterday and you have never done it before. I also learned the hard way that sometimes you just approach your advisor with open eyes. My advisor wasn't always completely on my side. Very unpleasant every now and then, and definitely contributed to my stress. But in the end, you learn from that too.
Let me ask this. How did it work? Like classes you would take. So you got a degree in theater with emphasis in costume design. So you're taking a class. I don't know, when I did English, we did like early Victorian literature. So you're taking a class in some aspect of theater or costume design or something like that. But then you're also working on a show. In high school, right? You take a theater class and then that theater class is responsible for a production and that affects your grade. How does it work in college? How do the classes and the productions connect with each other, or do they?
At OU, sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. It depended on the aspect of the production. OU was not a conservatory style school. It everyone had to take the basics and everything. So I had to take a basic acting class, a basic scenic class, and lighting and sound and whatnot. Just because, it's good to know everything. It's good to know what other people need from you from their perspective. That helps. We had, it's kind of complicated. In OU, if you were the designer or the actor, you didn't get a grade based on your performance, or your production. Yeah, that was you. To my senior year, they started giving you like a 1 credit kind of special studies thing for each production you designed, but in general, it was separate from grades. My costume design classes, there were 3 of them. They were theoretical designs. They were like, here's a show, draw what you would do and tell me why. And those are actually really good concept pieces and theoretical pieces, because what they show for a young designer, what they can show a new director is like, maybe I haven't had a huge shop making costumes for me. So you've never, nothing that's like crazy of mine has ever hit the stage, but this is what I do when money is not an issue. This is where my head's at. This is, this is the best of me. So theoretical work is super important. And that was what we got graded on. But our productions, if you were in charge of it, you didn't get graded on it. You just had to do it. And it was your technical classes where you were like, everybody had to take, how do you stitch? How do you paint a wall? Like, how do you hang a light? Things like that. Those classes you would get graded on. And in those classes, everybody who was involved, they were like lab classes, and the labs were largely responsible for making the costumes and making the sets and things like that. And there were also, OU has a really cool, interesting situation that was super, super good for portfolios and resumes and whatnot, where if like as a costume designer, and this is why I have stitching and design experience, as a costume designer, I had to work in the shop as an undergraduate assistant, and I would get paid like minimum wage. And this was how they got the complicated garments made. So I've got 4 years of essentially professional stitching under my belt, which makes me a much better designer because I know what I'm asking for, and also makes me a lot more marketable.
That's fascinating. Just the different ways. Again, we have this perception, right, that there's this one path through college, and your freshman year, you're going to take these 10 classes, and your sophomore year, and it's just not that way at all. Mm-hmm. It ends up being, honestly, you said earlier, I thought about this, and you said you have kind of your path laid out to where you want to go, and then just get ready for what the detours are going to be along that path, Well, Ciara, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk with me. Is there any big idea? We talked about your website is Ciara Smith
Yeah.
at dot org, right? .org. Sorry, no, .com.
.com.
Get it one more
Yes.
time. KiraNeemSmith.com. And that's to see your portfolio,
Mhm.
to be hearing about you, 5 years from now when you get your Tony, and just make an illusion. You don't have to mention my name in the acceptance speech, just an illusion to me. We'll be fine,
Yeah.
But no,
Not
that's
all
great stuff.
credit, but first on the list, right? First on
So, well, thank you so much. Anything, how is Cleena doing? I meant to ask, I referenced her earlier, but how's she doing?
She's doing really well. She's home right now for the
Okay.
holidays. She's going to be going back to school. OU kind of went online and kind of didn't, so she's still living out in Norman.
Okay.
Yeah, and then hopefully as soon as she graduates, she's going to book it up to New York too.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having
Talk
me.
to you soon. All right. Blast.